everybody. I am Marina Malagudi, and I'm your host at Embossed. Embossed is a podcast I've created to highlight women with amazing paths of success here in Chicago. Last year, I set out to interview the only 40 female CTOs in the city, and this year I've expanded to female CEOs and women in politics and government in Chicago. I'm excited to share these interviews with you, and I hope you contact me at www.embossed.io or email me at marina@embossed.io. Hope to see you soon.
Debbie Reynolds, the Data Diva, is a world-renowned technologist, thought leader, and advisor handling global data privacy, cyber data breach response, and complex cross-functional data-driven projects. Ms. Reynolds is an internationally published author, highly sought speaker, and top media presence about global data privacy, data protection, and emerging technology issues. Ms. Reynolds has been named to the Global Top 20 CyberRisk Communicators in European Risk Policy Institute 2020 and recognized as one of the stellar women who know cyber by Cybersecurity Ventures in 2021. Ms. Reynolds also produced the top 5 data privacy podcast in 2021 called The Data Diva Talks Privacy. Welcome.
Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at Embossed. Today, my guest is Debbie Reynolds. She is the Data Diva, global data privacy and protection expert strategist, a technology, a speaker, an author, an educator. Debbie has many talents. Welcome, Debbie, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Marina. I'm really happy to be able to do this show with you today.
Thanks. And I'm excited to talk to a fellow podcast host.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Before we jump into the meat of the discussion, can you give us some context about who you are, and maybe where you grew up, a story about you as a little girl, and how do you end up here in Chicago?
Oh, great. Wow, that's a big list. Let's see. So I was born in Chicago. I grew up actually in Gary, Indiana. My parents moved there for a bit, and then I came back to Chicago to go to university. I went to Loyola University, and then I started my career here sort of by accident in technology. So I was a philosophy major in college. I was going to go to law school, and my mother was diagnosed with cancer my senior year in college. And so I wanted to find something I could do and be with her. So I decided I would buy a computer, teach myself to use it. And then I started doing like desktop publishing. That's what they called it back then. It's like graphic design. So that's how I taught myself computers. And then I started getting interested in databases. And a friend of mine asked me to help out a university library. They were that was at the time when they were going from card catalogs to create databases. So I fell in love with data. So I've had a very long data career, over 30 years actually. So I started with, again, university libraries, and I moved over to helping Fortune 500 companies create databases of legal documents. And I did that for many years. Now it's like an industry unto itself. Back then it wasn't, many years ago. And then because I worked with so many multinational companies and did a lot of work with data movement around the world, a lot of people who knew me from those companies would contact me directly and say, hey, we have a privacy issue we want to talk to you about. So that's pretty much how my technology career started. My privacy part of my technology career started. Yeah. And actually, a woman that seen me speak, this was like in, 2015 or so, someone has seen me speak at a conference and asked me to come to their company to speak. It was actually a general counsel at McDonald's Corporation. So they asked me to come speak to their corporate law department about the General Data Protection Regulation, which was a regulation that had not yet gone into effect at that point. So that's kind of, the start. And then, as you said, around 2018, someone at PBS called me up. I thought it was like a fund drive or something. I almost didn't pick up the phone. They asked me to come speak on TV about this new regulation. And so since then, so many other countries and cities and states have passed a lot of data privacy regulation. And it's been pretty interesting to see how that has come about. So, yeah.
Where did you learn, or what inspired you to, with all of the things that you could have chose to do, what inspired you to pick up that computer when you were with your mom?
I had to find something that I could do and be with her. So I couldn't do something where I had to be away from her. And I thought, if I do something on computers and I'm creating, I guess it's creating content, right? I don't know. I hadn't thought about it back then. If I could do something to earn money that way, I would sort of do that. But also, one thing around that time that had inspired me about privacy that got me interested, my mother was reading a book called The Right to Privacy, and it came out in 1997. And it just sparked my interest. I think a lot of people think things are private that aren't, and a lot of people think, especially in the U.S., we think, land of the free, home of the brave, and we have all these freedoms. And then when you look at the fine print, it's like, privacy really isn't in there, So, that concerned me greatly, and still so. It concerns me as an individual, and then I help businesses be able to navigate that as well. Because you want to protect the rights of people, but then you want to make money too. So there's a way to do that. So I help do it.
Yeah, I love that. What are other misconceptions that people usually think they have a right to privacy, but they actually don't?
It's like, so I guess the best way I can describe it in the Constitution, we have a right against unreasonable search and seizure from the government.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't, so if you're not in a search or seizure situation, they don't say anything about anything else. You know what I'm saying? So, like, what if you're not, what if you don't want to share stuff? Like, do you have a right to not share? And that's really not articulated in our laws in the way that it should be. So, a lot of the laws that you think about when you think about privacy, they're about consumer activity. So if you're not consuming, what right do you have when you're not transacting? So let's say if you're indigent or you don't have a lot of money, then you don't have any privacy if you're not actually buying things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's troubling to me that there's a gap there. And so, like I like to tell people, not every human is a consumer. So I like to think about privacy as a human right as opposed to just a consumer right.
Absolutely. I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but there's a lot of trends around how privacy as a basic right, it's coming in to corporations, into legislation. There's even talks about people owning their own data at the individual level and getting compensated for the use of that data.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about that and or other trends that be coming in?
That's actually a pretty good one. I think a lot of people in privacy, they argue whether you should or shouldn't earn money from your data. And to me, I feel like that ship has sailed already, right? So
we're not getting any.
Right, these $1 billion, $1 trillion companies are making money from selling data already. So the question now is, are you going to benefit from it or not? So you have to decide whether you want to do that. I think that conversation is gonna, in terms of a future trend, that's a conversation that's gonna start happening very soon. Because now we have a situation where consumers, like for example, Apple had rolled out this new iOS 14.5. They had all these new privacy features in it. And one privacy feature they had in it, in terms of marketers, they sort of opted people out of marketing unless they wanted to opt in. And I think as of this date, very few, I want to say like less than 5% of people who had downloaded that actually opted into advertising. So if the advertisers can't get your information for free, they're going to eventually try to offer you money for it. So I think the data monetization question will start coming up very soon, because these marketers, some of these marketers, let's say they're making like $1 billion a year or something. So if they can't get access to these people, maybe they'll make zero. So instead of making zero, they'll say, hey, let me give you some money, give me data, I'll give you money, and then we can both make money. So I think that's going to happen.
I'm kind of half super excited about this because it feels brighter than, than what is happening right now. Or they're just like taking whatever I put out and just doing whatever you want with it just because I put it out, or just because the platform is free. And also I am excited for anybody to make money, especially people that are over consumers of the technology, which in my opinion may actually extremely benefit marginalized communities that use these tools, and were effectively people of color were effectively the biggest spender during the pandemic, and then we can continue to see those trends, and really benefit from their contribution to the economy, honestly.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It's like people who use the technology so much, why not benefit, I guess? I think the issue is, especially with a free service, the value exchange is very asymmetrical. So, let's say you like Facebook. Facebook is free. They may earn $5,000 a year from you, but you may not get $5,000 in value from them. So I think that monetization issue can definitely even up that exchange matter and make people feel, maybe to make people feel like, okay, maybe I'll share more, or maybe I'll share different types of things because of this. So I don't know. It's a slippery slope in a way, because people, I heard people say, like, I don't want someone who's starving feel like that's the only way they can make money to sell their data. But on the flip side is, if you're a content creator, right, you're creating value that the company benefits from, why shouldn't you benefit from it as a content creator?
Totally. Yeah. These are very interesting topics, and I feel like I can talk to you about this all day. But let's talk about your career. So you fell into technology. You kind of just decided, this is what's happening, and you jumped in it. Now that you're here, since the last, I think, 5 years, we've been hearing a lot more story about women participating in the tech industry. How was your experience compared to, or even not compared to, how was your experience in the industry as a Black woman, in privacy? Probably we haven't seen, and still today there's not that many of you.
No, it's not. Right. So there aren't enough women in tech. There aren't a lot of Black women or women of color in tech. There definitely aren't, for me, there aren't enough women of color that are getting exposure in tech. So it's not like we don't exist. It's like there are so few of us, and we don't, a lot of times, let's say you go to a conference or something, I go to conferences where I'm like, sometimes I'm the only Black person, in the whole conference. If I look the whole speaker thing, it's just me, and it's like, oh my goodness, So I would love to see, and I try to get people that I know that are really good to try to get out there more, right? To be able to, speak at conferences, write blogs, get involved so that people can call you up to be, so you can be more present. So to me, it's kind of a double-edged thing. One is there aren't enough women and women of color in these roles, and then there isn't enough there's an underrepresentation of those people, because whether they're not getting the opportunities, whether they're not chasing the opportunities. And I try my best to try to half people, and sometimes like pulling teeth. It's like, oh my God, I need you, speak at this conference, or, do this different thing. So I'm always excited when I meet someone who really wants that opportunity. And people have called me up. It's funny because they're, I'll get a message on LinkedIn and someone say, oh, I really like what you're doing. Let me know if there's an opportunity comes up where I can do stuff. And a lot of times when people call me, I do have stuff that I can get them involved in. So I've been really happy to be able to plug people into opportunities to do different things. So to me, it's fun.
That's nice. That's awesome. And beyond definitely like you were saying, like, you're kind of like reaching for other people to come up in technology. But I would still wonder, like, your experience in the industry throughout the years. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I tell people, I've been Black all my life, so I don't have anything else to compare it to, right? But I think, for me, being able to find your own path, right? So not necessarily, there's nothing wrong with looking at someone else's path and try to follow it. Technology is very different. So a lot of things we're talking about are being created right now. So there really aren't a lot of paths. You got to kind of create your own. But I think it's really important that you kind of study and really dive in to a subject that you can look at more deeply so that you can be an expert. So that helps you stand out among other people. And, most employers aren't going to push you in that direction, right? Because they have a job that they want you to do for 8 hours a day or whatever. So they really, that's their thing. But like, what is your thing? Like outside of work? Like, are you reading books? Are you studying? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing to make yourself unique? Because I tell people, you're not your job.
Yeah.
That's what you do 8 hours a day. So who are you the other 16 hours a day? So you have to have an identity. You need to have a brand. I tell people you have a brand whether you like it or not. But branding is, if you do it right, is about you being able to articulate or show people who you are, what you can do, and you can tell your story so that someone else is trying to fill in the gap for you.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you've charted your path in this tech world. I really like that advice that you said, like, when when you said the employer wanted you to work 8 hours a day. That's their thing, but what's your thing? It's almost, it's almost, I can completely relate to that, because it's almost as if sometimes we can take on this, like, their responsibility of that part of the work as well, when in reality, I totally can see how we can separate ourselves from our job, have other interests, do other things beyond our work. What are some of the things that you spent time doing in order to develop your brand beyond your work?
I read a lot. I read a ton. I don't think, if you don't like reading, privacy is probably not a good profession for you. So you got to read. It's a lot of regulations, a lot of news. I follow the technology, so I look at the technology and then I think, okay, so what's going to happen as a result of this? So I've been pretty successful in being able to kind of guess what those trends are. So definitely reading, definitely understanding the technology, being able to communicate. For me, I have to be able to communicate to anybody. So I tell people I need to be able to communicate stuff about privacy to someone who's 80 or someone who's 8 years old. So I do my best to try to talk to people just in all walks of life, because privacy is a human problem. And so it can't be just ivory tower, people at conferences with, leather patches on tweed jacket conversations. It has to be, everybody, your grandmother, your parents, your kids. I talk with business executives at all levels. Not everyone is super hyped about technology. So, I let the message meet the person where they are.
Beautiful. Thank you. Any like mentors or allies you've encountered in your career, and if so, how did that help you navigate the tech field?
Yeah. I have a really great mentor. We've known each other for almost 30 years. He was one of my first bosses that I ever had. When I transitioned from kind of library science to more, working with corporations. And so his name is Mike Bryan. I'm going to embarrass him. And so we've been friends. He's been a mentor to me for all this time. And, we've lived in different cities, and we'll go to conferences or just run into each other just by happenstance, or our thing is we'll have breakfast a couple times a year and hang out. He's in Chicago too now. But, he's been someone that I can bounce ideas off of, and he's given me great advice in my career, just business in general. So, I love to have him as a sounding board. It's really cool because I'm in a different industry than him. I think, I know a lot of times when people think about mentors, they think, oh, I want a mentor in my industry. Having someone who's outside your industry is probably even better because they can see things maybe you can't see, right? Because, business is business. So regardless of what you're doing in business, there are some common themes that you can pick up on from all types of business people. So he's been great.
What is a lesson that you can share? I mean, I'm sure, Mike, if you're hearing this, you have plenty of lessons that are. But it's like, what is something that has resonated or has recently come up for you that you can share with us?
Good question. I always, one of my early bosses told me something, and it still resonates today. And I tell people this all the time: is, he says a good job doesn't love you back. So a lot of times people invest so much in jobs and don't invest enough in other things that they think are important. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to stay late at work and miss my kids' baseball game. That's not the way life is supposed to be, right? Because you can always stay late at work, but you're, having that time with your family or figuring out what's, the best for you is really important. So, work has its place, but you have to, it can't supersede you having a life.
Yeah, absolutely. Which takes me to, honestly, like something that I've been recently super interested in creating a framework around, which is like the future of work. What an opportunity with COVID and with what you're seeing about like a good job doesn't love you back, with people realizing that they actually work from home, but really they could work from anywhere.
Right.
Have you seen or experienced any trends around the future of work, and or any hopes for what it could look like?
Yeah. I think before COVID, we didn't want to admit it, but I think the 5-day, come in and work 9 to 5, 5 days a week, that was broken before COVID. So it wasn't working before COVID. So COVID made it more evident that it was broken.
Tell me more about it. Tell me, because I know I have a perspective of how I think it was broken, but I want to hear your perspective.
Oh yeah, so I have tons of thoughts about this. So
let's go.
Like I knew a lady. She worked five days a week in the office, and she had little small kids, and she wanted to work from home 1 day a week, and her employer gave her such a hard time about that. That would have made her life so much easier with her kids and stuff that she had to do. And they just insisted and couldn't really articulate why it was so important that she be in the office 5 days a week. So now we have COVID and she's at home 5 days a week. So it's like, when it benefited you wanted me to work from home. But when it benefited me, you didn't want me to. So I think that's one reason why we're having problems, or employers are having problems, people going back into the office, because they're like, it wasn't working before. Like I didn't, I would tell people, why does everybody leave home at the same time and come back at the same time?
Yes.
That's ridiculous. I
Why
don't
would you?
understand.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
Why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. Or that your kid gets out of school before you get out of work, so now you have to pay for that extra 2 hours. That's ridiculous.
Yes, thank you.
That doesn't make that makes no sense. To me that was like 50's housewife. The wife is at home, she's waiting for the kid to come and then feed them, and then the dad comes. The life is just not that way. So why are we trying to
the wife is a husband now, and
right.
everything everything is different. So.
Right, exactly. So I feel like, I think this is a reckoning on work and how people really needed that flexibility. And it's just going to be different now. I think work is going to be hybrid now. It has to be. People just aren't going to put up with that. Because I've seen people, and people have told me anecdotally, they're like, I like this. This is working out great for me with flexibility and stuff. And if my employer doesn't like that, then I'm going to go work somewhere else.
Yeah. I am 100% with that story. Having a 4-hour commute at some point, I was like, why is this a thing? And being a mother, I'm like, why is my school not supporting my working hours? It's just so much more stressful and ridiculous and lonely, honestly, and just silly than what we care to admit. And I have this almost fear that we're just gonna go. Everybody's gonna go back the way it was because of how human nature is, then instead of taking an opportunity to truly think about how we would like it to be and how it could work better for others as well.
Yeah. I had a guy, to tell you a short story. I had a guy that I was working on a project with the company, and they had a very rare and very expensive software solution, several $1 million. And very few people in the US knew this tool. So I knew a guy, he was very well versed in this tool, didn't want to work full time. I didn't have full time hours for him. I just needed some of his time. And he agreed to that. And his thing was he wanted to work remotely. And I'm like, great, So I had at that point, when I took the proposal to management, they're like, yeah, well, it's fine, but he has to work in the office. I'm like, what? It's ridiculous. It's like, I would be a fool not to take this deal. It's there's no one in thousands of miles that can do what he can do. He's remote. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why would I not take the opportunity to utilize his skills, and just because he doesn't want to come in the office?
Yeah.
And so I was like, I just did it anyway. I was like, yeah, because no one ever knew if he was in the office or not. So I was like, yeah, let's just do it. You know what I'm saying? Everything was remote. I signed the time cards remote. He had a desk, and you could see the stuff moving on his computer, right? But he wasn't physically in the office. So yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I used to do that too, actually. I'm not gonna say where or which management, but I used to put up my remote computer remote in to my computer, and it looked like I was working because this
right.
things that happening. I technically was working, just not there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't think a lot of employers don't have a good reason. They never had a good reason, and now they really don't have a good reason. So before it's we need to all be in the office. Well, why? We just need to be here. But now that everyone's out of the office, it's okay, now what?
Yeah, so let's play devil advocate. What about the theory, or the theory that says that location builds culture, and that alignment, it's so much easier being in person. You need to be in person in order to build a culture and to build values at a company. And I am using this tone not because I'm making fun of it, it's just because I want to make sure that some of these things are addressed.
Yeah. I don't agree with that at all. You have culture all over. You can find ways to have culture. I think there are certain jobs that you do or certain things that you do where it makes sense to be in person, but I'm definitely not gonna. For me, I'm not gonna risk my health to be, in a rah-rah session. Especially we can do that, remotely. So it has to be like a really good reason, because I was, in situations where I would fly to New York for an hour to meet somebody and come back. So why would I do that?
Unless you actually want to go to New York.
Yeah, right. So right, exactly. So I want to go to New York, that's different. But it's like, wouldn't it be easier? Wouldn't it save me more money if I just had a call with someone? And to me, those types of things don't make sense in the future, right? Maybe, let's say if you were doing something where you had to be, several days, people collaborating on site or, doing something, maybe that's different. But, you know, again, a lot of those are few and far between. And I know friends at companies that, they're looking at how much they're saving on business travel, so I think they're going to be rethinking that at least, you know what I mean? Like, not all business travel is necessary travel. And then, the time that you're spending away from your family, that all adds up.
Absolutely. That is if you like your family and you want to spend
Right, exactly.
Because apparently there's trends in the pandemic that we saw a huge spike in separations and disagreements.
Right, right, yeah.
That's okay. So here's another thing that and why I think like we could do a better job at this too is I think that while I do agree with all of this, I don't think technology is there to really I don't want to say that to make it seem like we're in person, because I don't think it would ever be ever as close, like so close or equal to it. But there could be more, in my view, at least. I don't know what. I don't have a solution, but I do think there's a gap between the technology that we have available today and the technology that we need in order to truly have a sense of collaboration and organization um, and like work dynamics that are better suited for these hybrid models that may be coming up in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely. I had the pleasure of attending a couple of conferences last year that were like Avatar. They were virtual reality conferences. So it's almost like a game. You you dress up and you figure out how you're gonna look, and it has your name. So you walk around and you encounter people and you talk, and it was great. It was so much fun because you know, it puts less pressure on you. So like right now, like you're on Zoom, you have to have all makeup. Like this, you have an avatar, so you can be in your pajamas and hair rollers, and no one will see what you look like. But you're like interacting, you're talking to people, and I thought that was great. It was a great break away from just having just a flat face-to-face call.
Yeah.
And then you're just kind of walking around, and the campus had like little features where you can get on a boat and like ride around. And it was fun. So I'm hoping to see a lot more of that. I think that there are going to be a lot more applications of virtual reality, augmented reality stuff in the workplace. I've actually seen where some companies are developing things where they have training things where you're like an avatar. So instead of you watching a video, for HR, you'll play a role, right? So you go into the role play thing, and that's how you do that. So I'm excited to see that the more gamification of, the more interaction in kind of a virtual space.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's still one thing that is still going to bother me from this that I just want to mention and see if I get a reaction from you, which is like, while our mind and our eyes are going to be moving, our body is going to be still. And it is very hard for me to reconcile this. I wish I could take technology with me wherever I am instead of being stuck in a stationary desk,
right,
while I use the technology. So I think there's even the next level could be enhanced reality everywhere or
Right.
something,
Yeah.
but not so much that people can
Yeah.
connect to each other in person anymore. It's going to be a balance.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, there are things being developed right now that are exactly what you're talking about right now. So it's called more augmented reality. So it's like almost like a 3D map, a 4-dimensional map of the world. You're walking down the street. You may have glasses that look like your regular sunglasses and just tell you different things, and you're interacting in different ways. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I think people are going to be surprised to see how this all plays out.
I am excited for something like this, and mostly because I hope it allows people. And I don't necessarily have anything bad with people wanting to walk to the office. I just want people to live the best life that they can, and if that is not in an office, then why should it be?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Should we talk about podcasting a little bit?
Sure. Absolutely.
So, I'm a newbie, literally a podcast. You have one of the top podcasts on Apple Podcast. Want to tell the audience a little bit about it, and then give me some advice.
Okay, great. Okay, so my podcast is called the Data Diva Talks Privacy Podcast. It was rated the top 5 data privacy podcasts.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool because in the top 5 is $4 billion companies and then me talking about privacy. So it's actually kind of nice to be up there. Podcasting is, I read a ton about it, and it took me about 4 months before I could actually, figure out the concept of what I wanted to do, do the equipment thing, just figure out how I wanted to present the podcast or whatever. And so I think the one thing that they don't tell you is that, people say, oh, it's very inexpensive to be able to get into podcasting, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. It's like I would say for every hour of recording, you probably have 6 hours of work that you have to put in to actually completing an episode, and a lot of people don't even do that. So I think the stat I read recently is that I think there are over 2 million podcasts. It's a very low number, right?
Mm-hmm.
But only about 700,000 of those have episodes that have released in the last 90 days. So it's very, a lot of people start and then they probably get tired out and just don't do it. So they say that a lot of people start, they do 3 and then they give up or something. And then yeah, as you get more episodes, people start paying you more attention. And I guess I found out, the magic number is 25. So once you get to 25 episodes, they consider you you're serious, right?
Wow. I guess I'm serious. I am officially serious.
Yeah, you're serious. Right, exactly. So then you get a lot more attention because they're this is not a passing fad. This person's putting out content, and the internet likes new information. So it's like a hungry bear. So if you're not feeding it new information, it's not going to pay you any attention.
I love that imagery about the internet. I never thought about it that way, but you're totally right. Okay, if you had to tell your early podcast day self a few tricks to just bypass some of the hurdles that you just faced,
Mm-hmm.
give me a couple of tricks so that I know how to do this right.
Oh, wow. The best trick that I can tell anyone is to do the production of the podcast in batches. So let's say you record a couple or whatever, and then all that post recording work that you do, it's hard, right? It takes a lot. It's not necessarily hard, it's time consuming. So
yes.
if you do it in batches, so for me, 1 weekend a month I do production on podcasts. So I may have recorded 4 or 5, but for that weekend, I'm doing all the steps for those 4 or 5 because they're the same, right? So it's a repetition. You're doing the same thing over and over, as opposed to trying to record one, do the production, record, do the production. So that's one thing that's helped me a lot with content. I do that. I have weekly videos come out as well, and I do the same. So for the weekly videos, I record 4 at a time, and then I release one a week. So that helps me stay ahead. So anything that you can do, I try to stay for my podcast. I try to stay 4 to 6 weeks ahead. So for every episode I release, I have 4 or 6 in the can, already ready to go. So that's my best advice. Because at first, when I started doing video before I started doing podcasts, and then so every week I would, I put on makeup and do all this other type of stuff, have to research, and it was like agonizing trying to do that every week. And I was like, this is so bad. I have to find a better way. And then, researching, you have to do a lot of research before you do videos, so you know what you're talking about. So now what I do research constantly. So I'm always like, if I see an article, I'll flag it right then, and then I can go back to my file or everything, so that I'm not chasing stuff. And then for the videos, it saves me a lot on makeup too, where I get it all made up. I have my topics, and I do 4 videos in one sitting, and then we produce them, and then I release them once a week.
What is an episode that has had, surprisingly to you, more attention than what you thought it would?
Oh, wow. There's an episode, I absolutely love it. I've probably listened to it myself 10 times.
Really? Which one?
Yeah. So it's a guy who's head of policy and privacy policy and fairness at Facebook. His name is Pedro Pavon. I can't remember what episode number he was, but he's cool. So he's Latino. He likes to talk about his Latino excellence, and him and I had really cool conversations about, privacy, about, being, a black and brown person in privacy, about bias, the things that we go through that maybe some of our other, privacy folks don't experience, because they're not of color. So I loved our episode, because I feel like the conversation we had, very few people can have. Because we're talking about things from our experience as opposed to anecdotally, So we talked a lot about facial recognition, and we talked about algorithms making decisions about people. And I thought it was a very real conversation, and it was so unique, I think. So I loved it, because it's like, who else could say this,
That is really awesome. I love when those episodes happen where you put them out. Well, I personally have had a couple where I put them out, and I don't think, like, I had a good vibe about them, but I never thought, and then they become more popular than others, and I was like, oh, who figures?
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Anything else about podcasting that can help me or somebody who's listening grow your podcast into like a top 5 Apple podcast?
Yeah. I would say, find a way to be consistent. So consistent in terms of the pacing of how often you release your podcast. But also, it's like, growing up, when you had a TV show that you want to watch, you had a general, even though the episode may have different themes, right? You had a general idea of what you were tuning into. So you want to make sure that the way that you craft your podcast, people know in general what you're talking about, because you don't want them to listen to your podcast and feel like, oh, this is totally not interesting. This is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not interesting. So being able to have kind of thematic, kind of overarching things that you talk about will help. And then being able to, have episodes where you can explore different facets of that will help you be more consistent, or help people vibe more with what you're doing. So I think, one thing that I think some people do in podcasting, they're like, let's just hit record and just start talking. But if you don't have you don't have a path or structure about where you're trying to go, at least at a high level, it'll confuse people, and they probably wouldn't want to tune in. So, you want to, like, even my description, So when I do descriptions, I try to make sure that I'm very detailed about what we're going to talk about. So if someone reads the description, they know exactly what what I said. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they don't have to guess what I said, or if it's not something they're interested in, then they don't have to listen, right? But it's in there so that they can say, "Oh yeah, I want to know about this particular topic, so I'm going to listen to this episode."
Absolutely, totally. That is such good advice, and it takes us actually to, unfortunately, the last part of our interview here, because it's almost time, and I want to be respectful and mindful of your time. But I hope you come back soon, or you invite me to your podcast.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
I have a few outros questions for you. And these are just like fun questions, so answer however you wish. What is one thing that we don't know about you that you may want to share?
Oh wow, let's see. Okay, well, I'll share one thing. So I was, let me see, I'm trying to think how I want to say this. So my name is Debbie Reynolds, and I was named after the actress Debbie Reynolds. I don't know if anybody knows that. So
Yeah,
Debbie Reynolds was, if you're a certain age, a lot of people don't know who she is, right? So I tell the younger people, I say she was Princess Leia's mother, I guess, right?
Yes.
So when I was born, my brother had a crush on the actress, and he convinced my parents to name me after her. So that's
That is a really cool story. What is a book you have gifted the most, or that you have recently really liked?
Oh, great question. I can't. Oh, I think the book that I've gifted the most, I think it's called A Tree of Life. I have to look back and make sure.
I
It's
gotcha.
called A Tree of Life. I think that's the one I've over the years. I have several copies that I've bought. Actually, my best friend bought it for me in college. I bought myself a copy. I will have several that I would give out to people.
Hugh Nessenson.
Yeah.
How does a woman who had everything find her way in this world when all the meaning has been removed?
Yeah. 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 Very cool. Very cool. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting book. Yeah, I don't know. I love to read. I like to read a lot of stuff, especially about, you know, I love reading like psychology,
Yes.
technology, how all that fits together, how people think, how people make decisions. I love that.
Absolutely. What is a book? Well, you are an author, but what is another book you may write?
Oh wow, that's an excellent question. That's one of the best questions I've ever heard, actually.
Oh, thank you.
The book that I want to write is about how people are deferring their human decision or judgment to computers.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's something I thought I was hoping would never happen, but it's definitely happening now, which concerns me. So it's like, we're it's almost like we're trying to give computers or robots or AI almost like human qualities, So you see a robot and it looks like a human, right? It's like, no, it's not. It's actually not a human. It's like, I tell people it's like the difference between a teddy bear and a grizzly bear. So we're treating technology like a teddy bear, and we need to be treating it like a grizzly bear.
That's pretty good. Does it have something to do with who's behind that keyboard, though? Whether it's a teddy bear or a grizzly bear?
Well, I think the problem is we don't understand enough about what technology is doing and what decisions is making about us. So let's say you went onto a website, you're doing a paper about cancer research, or let's say you have a friend that had cancer, you like looking up something. Let's say the AI for whatever thing you're looking at or they say, well, we think that this person is searching because they have cancer. And then I'm going to sell this information to an insurance company that's going to cancel your insurance and not tell you why. That is the problem, right? Or I read an article about a drone. It's a drone like the military has drones where they, identify people. It's very like high, like movie stuff, right? So you have a drone, drives around, flies around trying to identify people. And if it's like a military drone, they try to identify a person and they try to kill the person, right? So there was an article about this drone that they said they swore up and down that they did not give the drone a command to do this, but the drone detached itself, went out flying around looking for an individual person and trying to kill them. It was like, this is not good because
It's not good.
We're letting the technology control itself. Like, we're supposed to be controlling the technology.
That sounds like a lie, but I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna give it to the government to be creative enough to come up with such an answer.
Exactly. Right. That's something that like a 5-year-old would tell you.
Yeah. We could do an episode only about how AI is taking over our decision making. I think that would be really cool.
Oh yeah, totally.
Anything, if there was, let's wrap it up in one last thing. If there's one thing you want the audience to remember about privacy, about you, let's give them the last little tidbit.
I would say be aware. Be aware of what you share. So I think a lot of times it was like, oh, we're going to give technology all this data, and then we like are afraid because it's out of hand. So once it's out of your control, you can't really do a lot about it. So keep things in your control if you don't want it misused or abused. That's probably my best advice.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Debbie. Where can people find you?
So I have a website called DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com. I also have a podcast on Apple Podcasts and all the major podcast directories. It's called The Data Diva Talks Privacy.
Well, thank you so much, Data Diva, for coming on my podcast. I'm Boss. I hope to see you soon again. And this was a great interview. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. This is so much fun. I really appreciate it.